Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the March 21st, 2019 meeting of the Downtown Design Review Committee. We'll start with roll call. Present.
Present.
Thank you. Assuming everyone's had a chance to review the minutes from last meeting, are there any questions or comments on the minutes? If not, do we have a motion?
Motion to approve.
Second.
That was a Jones-Kriegel motion. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? The minutes are approved. Okay, we have no cases withdrawn, we have no continuance requests, and we have nothing on the consent docket. So we will move into cases for individual consideration. I would like to reorganize the order of the items, moving item 6A to the end of the docket, and therefore we will start with item 6B, 420 South Broadway Avenue. Before we get into each one of these, I'd just like to let everybody know we do have a pretty full docket today, and we are requesting that as people make presentations and make comments, they please keep it as concise and on point as possible, and then if things have been said to avoid repeating the same items over and over again. So with that, we'll start with 420 South Broadway.
Good morning. This is a request to demolish the building some people refer to as the Gold Building, not the Gold Dome. This is the Gold Building, which sits at the Boulevard and E.K. Gaylord. During review of this project, I'm so sorry. Oh, yes, that's correct.
Sorry, I need to request my vote. This project is FSB. It's
Okay.
Brian. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
Well, actually, sorry, on that note, do we have any other potential abstentions or time constraints today? Just want to flush those out ahead of time if we do. Okay, I think we're good.
There is a 1:30 meeting scheduled for this.
Okay. Okay.
So this is a building that, based on some old pictures, we discovered had been there since the early, I guess you could say the teens, let's just pick 1915. Unfortunately, the information that the county has on the website and the information that was picked up on this when the intensive level survey, historic survey was done, was when it was renovated in 1987, which is when they put the gold on the building. So we don't really have a clear idea of the condition. There is some information about some significant damage to the underlying building on the corner that we're looking at here. But with that in mind, staff would also point out that this is an integral part of an overall development plan that's going on right now. Obviously, the Omni's under, let me get to a good one. The Omni's under construction. The convention center is under construction. We have another hotel under construction, and the park is under construction. And previously, there had been some discussion about, we've got a parking garage and a multifamily mixed-use development going in on this block. That information, some general information is going to be provided to you today, because as you are probably aware, our demolition guidelines refer to replacement. And so since those applications hadn't come in for the replacement, they're going to provide you with some information today on what's proposed for that block. So given the information of what's proposed here and the fact that we do have a section in the guidelines that refers to demolition or removal of an existing structure may be appropriate to provide for the continued growth and vitality of the district and may facilitate economic development or otherwise improve a district's appearance. Staff is supportive of the proposed demolition. And with that, do you have any questions of staff? Otherwise, I'll just get out of the way and let them do their thing.
Do we have any questions for staff? Okay. Is the applicant ready?
Okay.
If you could state your name, please.
Yep, I'm Kathy O'Connor, the president of the Alliance for Economic Development, and here on behalf of the Oklahoma City Economic Development Trust, which is managing this project on behalf of the city. As was mentioned, this is the site of a mixed-use development that will include about an 1,100-space parking garage, along with a mixed-use development of apartments and retail and commercial space on the first floor. The building that is there is not suitable for what we have planned on the site, and its demolition is necessary in order to carry out the more extensive investment that's to take place. So I think we have some information from the development team is here, both for the mixed-use development and for the parking garage. So I think they may have some information that they can share about their prospective projects as well. Let's see which one? Who wants to go first? Anthony, you want to go first? So first we'll hear from the architect for the parking garage. The parking garage will be owned and operated by COTPA, by the Central Oklahoma Transportation and Parking Authority. And I'll turn it over to Anthony Mcdermott.
Thanks, Kathy. Anthony Mcdermott, 415 North Broadway Avenue. I'm the principal in TAF Architecture. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Next week, let me preface my remarks by saying that next month we will actually present the design of the garage in the spirit of expedition. I'll go through the presentation very quickly to describe the scope of the project, not necessarily get into the design, but tell you the parameters under which we designed the project. So here is the site. You can see that the entire block is basically covered with development. The south half of the block is the parking garage. It's on 6 levels, 1,100 spaces. It has 10 in and out gates. The garage is destined to serve the multi-use residential component and the commercial component of the project to the north of us. It directly connects to that project. It also serves the convention center with a direct connection, a bridge connection at the 3rd level of the garage. It also provides valet parking opportunities for the Omni, as well as transient parking and parking that will serve the New Sistertail Park and the Chesapeake. And those are the anticipated uses for the garage, but there will probably be more in the future as development goes on, maybe to the east side of the tracks. So it's 1,100 spaces, 6 levels. It is designed to expand to 1,400 spaces, which is an additional 2 levels. So it's an we anticipate it will be intensely used and support all of the development that goes on around it. Next slide. This gives you context in 3 dimensions. To the bottom left is the convention center. Middle left is the Omni Hotel. Obviously, you can see the Chesapeake, which is to the north, and the mixed-use development, which we tie into Boulevard Place, which is on the north side of the garage and directly connects to the garage. This is a stripped-down SketchUp model that shows you how the plates of the floor plates of the garage are configured and the bridge connection, and then also, as you see, we butt up against the development to the north. Again, from 4th Street, this is a south view. Again, I'm not trying to communicate a design at this point, just show the functionality of the garage. And here's a view from the west looking back to the east, showing how the bridge connects into the main core. The main core of the garage is on the southwest corner of the garage. And here, sort of an internally lit shot of how the garage faces the street and how the street is enhanced in a Project 180 spirit. From E.K. Gaylord, that used to be Shields and is now E.K. Gaylord, a view looking back to the northwest from the street. And I think that's it. I'm available to answer any questions you might have. I kind of glossed over the fact that we have 10 gates on the garage, and it is anticipated that one of the major uses of the garage will be transient parking for event. And so the 10 gates are designed to be tidal flow, as in they can all be in or they can all be out, and they open onto Broadway on the west side, Gaylord on the east side, and 4th Street on the south side. And one of the determinants in the design was that we could get in and out quickly on all 3 sides.
Great, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Hi, my name is John Sempner. I'm principal at FSB Architects. I'm here on behalf of Rose Rock Development Partners and the Boulevard Place development that will occupy the north half of this property. Boulevard Place is truly the first mixed-use, high-rise, really mixed-income development we've seen in the downtown core. It's 8 stories tall, 240 apartment units, and over 263,000 square feet of development. As you look at this kind of prominent northeast corner, this is the view you're going to see as you come from the east driving west under the railroad tracks of the Oklahoma City Boulevard. It's really an entryway into downtown in this area. We've really tried to highlight that with a beacon column of light there on that corner, a really prominent cap. We've brought the property as far as we could to the property line, and some of those features do hang over the property line up on the 8-story cap. This was really an evolution from the conceptual designs that were made public when we proposed on this to Acura. We really also want to highlight the grade change here. If you stand on that corner today, you'll see a large retaining wall. Here we've removed that retaining wall. We've brought the sidewalks down to the street level so pedestrians can walk along that, and then we've created elevated plazas to be able to walk up and engage that retail. Next. This is the northern facade of our building. Preliminarily, it's mostly brick. We do have metal panel and a lot of glass storefront on the building. We really think it brings an attraction to the main door of the residence. You can see it also has that kind of beacon light in the center. Really, you can see just the plethora of retail, the street engagement that you're going to get along the boulevard. And that was really a driving point, is how do we engage the street level at this? We think it really achieves that. One thing to note is our previous design had a lot of grays in it. We started adding some color to this. So the blue panels, the red awning, really kind of add a little bit more of a fun residential feel. The night shot, you can see those beacons of light really shining. You can also see the storefront at the base really bringing the attraction and activity to the street level. You can also see our amenities for our retail up on the 6th story, where we have an amenity deck with a pool. We have a lounge space for the residents. We have a workout facility. So we're trying to bring that excitement of the building and make it prominent to it. The northwest corner, we anticipate a lot of pedestrian traffic. That's the closest to the arena, the closest to the Omni. So we really think that's going to be our prominent, and we've tentatively always shown a restaurant at that location with an outdoor seating and dining. This really highlights that. You can see the elevated plaza for that dining. You can see along this edge, we've actually brought the building back a little bit in trying to fit this 1,100 space parking garage and our development on this site. We've actually had to move the property line north some. So as you look at the buildings that are sitting there today, we're coming farther up, but we've had to tuck back in on the west side so we can try to get some street parking to hopes of serving our retail tenants. You know, we're thinking that is short-term parking. People can stop, run in, get a coffee or something, and come back. We're really hoping to drive that to be a 20-minute type loading zone scenario. Another highlight is you can see, since we've stepped back, you can actually see that prominent corner of the garage. That's really going to allow people to orient themselves and see where they're going as they're trying to enter that side of the garage. Here, you can see the overall floor plan. You can see the property lines that we're locating. You can see where we're at the property lines. On that northwest corner, you can see we actually moved the property line as far as we could as it relates to the boulevard. And so now we have a larger setback, but we didn't want to move all the way to that property line because we would then step out in front of the Omni. We wanted to keep an approximately in line with that. You can also see kind of the connections to the garage, both in the center spine and on the east side. Here you can see kind of a colored floor plan of the first floor. The purple on here represents retail. You can see majority of that storefront you're seeing is all retail. In the lower right-hand corner or the southeast corner of the property, we have a two-story daycare space. So we have dedicated parking in the daycare so that people can stop, drop their kids off, walk in without crossing a lot of traffic. We didn't want them to try to stop on E.K. Gaylord or the Boulevard. You can see we do have some ground floor residential units there on the courtyards. The right courtyard is completely dedicated play space for that daycare. The left will be kind of more common and open. We will have public access from the parking garage directly north into our main lobby. So we're going to try to encourage that to get people to use the parking garage to visit our retailers. On the typical upper floors, you can see we have a mixed use of studios, 1 bedrooms and 2 bedrooms. You know, it's really a diverse layout. Here you can highlight that we also have connections to the parking garage on the majority of floors. And on the upper levels, the 6 stories, you can see how it steps back at that amenity deck. You can see our pool area. You can see the fitness center and lounge. It truly is a really great place that everybody's going to want to visit and show life out to the street in that area. And then we do have a 7th and 8th floor above that. So with that, I would take any comments.
Are there plans to submit this at the same time as the garage, or is that?
No, we would likely come probably a few months after the garage.
Okay.
Probably in the summertime.
Okay. Are there any questions? I'll just remind the committee that what we're voting on today is the demolition of the existing structure, and that these 2 projects will be coming later on for actual review and approval.
So I think that what we see, so I just have a kind of general comment about the site. Like what we see on the site today doesn't seem like it has much historic value, so I don't see an issue with demolishing, but these pictures of what's underneath, they do look sort of interesting, and I'm just trying to understand like what the status is of that building.
The applicant had provided some information about a particular corner of the building that had some significant damage that, and they might want to talk about that.
So as, I don't know if you have that photo.
Yeah,
so
I'll get there.
Some photos have been submitted that show kind of the in-progress application of that gold. There are two kind of historic buildings that were relevant, that are still kind of in pieces under that gold dome. In between them, there was a third that was demolished and rebuilt.
Okay.
So the entire south side of the north building, the entire north side of the south building were taken down. The whole facade was removed. And in fact, in that, you can kind of see it there in that bottom photograph where you can see directly in and see pure structure. You can also see them directly attaching the gold skin to the brick, so they're harming all of that brick, and then they infilled the majority of the windows with brick. On the inside, there's been a lot of deterioration of that, and once again, one of the things that we want to highlight with the parking garage and our Boulevard Place development, we actually had to increase the property lines just to make both of our projects fit as designed today. And so the lot lines, so to say, or that building facade is actually interior to both of our projects.
Do we have any more questions for the applicant? Do we have anyone else that would like to speak to the project? Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in Section C and D of the staff report.
Second that motion.
There was a Kriegel-Jones motion. All those in favor? Aye. All those opposed? The application is approved. Moving on to item 6C, 1110 North Lee Avenue. Is the applicant present? And we'll have staff introduce the project.
This is a request that,
Yeah, I'm sorry, do we need to,
I'm sorry, she's on her way back.
She is,
in.
okay.
I think I let her know that there she is. Okay. Within the last year or so, you had another request for a different block in St. Anthony's Hospital for some signage issues, and so we're now back because they did a rebranding and they're changing out some signs and adding some signs. The zoning for St. Anthony's Hospital, which is DTD1, only allows one sign per tenant, and when you have the entire block being one tenant and the type of tenant it is, there obviously is a need for a lot more than one attached wall sign. And as well as their freestanding signs are actually in the right-of-way, and they're changing and adding one, and so they need variances for not only signs in the right-of-way, but they need variances for the number of signs, and then they're limited to 150 square feet, and they want to go up to right about 175 square feet. So we've got all of those sections cited in the staff report. Staff has no issues at all with this proposal, given the tenant it is, the use, the customers that come here, and their need for knowing where to go on the building. So with that being said, I'll jump down. The staff recommendation is for approval, subject to the information contained in C and D, with the condition that they obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the prohibition against signs located in the public street right-of-way, the maximum number of attached signs, and the maximum number, that makes no sense, and maximum size for attached signs. And the second motion you need to make is relative to a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment, and staff is recommending that you make a recommendation of approval for the variances necessary for the project.
Any questions for staff? Okay, if you could state your name.
My name is Jim Gleason. I'm with G&S Sign Services, 1019 East Grand Boulevard in Oklahoma City. This is another phase to our large change-out for SSM Health, St. Anthony, all over the city. In this particular downtown location, we've got 2 of the monument signs that have already been put in. So this is our kind of our third phase to the change-out. Our next presentation, which I think may be on your next docket, will be much larger. But what we're doing is the monument signs that we're proposing are going to be throughout the campus, and just to identify each building mainly. And we'll be removing almost all of the signs. The only 2 that we'll be keeping on the main campus are some round curved signs at the east entrance. Other than that, pretty much everything will be replaced.
And I'm sorry, I'd failed to go through all of these, I'm sorry. So the monument signs, this is the new one is going to be located here. This is one that they're changing. And then there's reviews of the attached wall signs and their location. Some of them are very visible from the street, some of them aren't. They're more visible as you approach the building, like this one, because it's kind of tucked down. And then there's some new ones going in. This view, actually, just to the right of this one, is one of the newer ones that they came through and were able to get approved because it met all the requirements. I believe staff administratively approved that one when they did the rebranding. But this is where they're putting a new one up on the side of the parking garage. So I apologize for not showing you those.
If I'm correct, within this application, that's the one new one, right?
Correct.
All the others are replacing existing
you're
signs.
Correct. That one is a new one.
Do we have any, is there anything else you'd like to add?
No.
Okay. Do we have any questions for the applicant? Do we have a motion? Or discussion? Or a motion?
Yeah, I find wayfinding at a giant complex like this or a hospital very confusing, so I think that I can understand the need to have more signs. I will make a recommendation to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in sections C and D of the staff report, with the condition that the applicant shall obtain a variance from the Board of Adjustment from the prohibition against signs located in the public street right-of-way, the maximum number of signs attached, and the maximum size for signs attached. Then the second one, too. Provide a recommendation. Okay,
that's separate.
Okay,
We'll
okay, vote on that one.
roll with that motion first.
Second.
Okay, that was a Richards-Jones motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That motion carries.
Okay, and the second recommendation is of approval to the Board of Adjustment for a variance from the applicable sign code regulations pertaining to the prohibition of signs in the public street right-of-way, the maximum number of attached signs, and the maximum size for attached signs.
Second.
That was a Richard Jones motion. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? The application is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 6D, 516 Northwest 8th Street. Is the applicant present? If you
Yes.
could, and we'll have staff introduce the project.
This is a request to renovate a current apartment building, which I actually hadn't paid much of attention to it. I'll acknowledge that. I knew it was there, but you can't, it's hard to tell if it's being occupied currently. It's 3 stories. The lower level is a parking garage. You can see it has the entrance right there. And the proposal is to renovate it into a boutique hotel on the upper 2 floors and a restaurant on the lower floor, in addition to It has a very large vacant lot on the east side, and they're proposing to put a swimming pool, an outdoor bar, and a large outdoor space in that area. In looking at this proposal, we look to the renovation guidelines, and we cite some of the guidelines that we needed to pay attention to. Pretty much all the window openings are being revised, new windows being put in, there's some new doors being put in. The biggest concern that staff had dealt with a feature that we feel is one of the main character-defining features of the building, which is this concrete block screen wall that's in the front. The proposal is to cover both sides of it with drive-it, so essentially it would disappear and you wouldn't see it anymore. As stated in the staff report, we feel that the loss of one of the most character-defining features of the street facade would have a negative impact on our history and the type of things we're trying to maintain of the city, the identity we're trying to maintain. In our proposal, we're recommending that the project be approved with the exception of the item which was to cover both of this with drive-it. And I'll read how that's worded. We're recommending that that item be continued to allow the applicant to work with staff so that we can explore the possibility of leaving that feature within their project. The other item that I needed to bring up is they're proposing some revisions to the streetscape which will require approval from the Traffic Commission. They're wanting to put in some angled parking that, I'm trying to get the best view to see that one. Did I go past it? I must have. It's a very wide right-of-way through there. Currently, there's some on-street parking, and right there, I'm sorry, there it is. And what they're wanting to do is put a significant increase in the number of parking by adding the angled parking, and that is totally supported by the downtown development framework, because this is a primary parking concern in this area, and so staff is totally supportive of that. But we needed to make that as a condition because they don't have approval yet. They are going through that process. So staff's recommendation, again, is to approve the application except item 2B, and that is the one about putting the drive-it on the screen wall, on the basis the project complies with regulations and guidelines of downtown design district zoning, with the conditions that the applicant obtain approval from the Traffic Commission and the City Council for the angled on-street parking. And I don't know if we need a separate motion for this one. Continue item 2B, which was dealing with the existing block screen wall that they want to clad with drive-it. We want to continue that to the April 18th meeting so that the applicant can explore leaving the decorative cutout CMU screen wall exposed on the north facade.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for staff?
I didn't quite understand the significance of the facade and why we were trying to protect that. So if you can provide a little bit more detail, that might help. In the proposal, I saw that they were going to work to put this creative mural there, which looked pretty impressive to me also. But I'm not an architect person, so you might be able to provide some history.
Currently, they have not come forward with a mural. That is not part of what you're considering. And obviously, murals have to go through the Arts Commission, and they typically go to the Arts Commission first to get their recommendation before they're presented to you. The design of this, and I quoted from the intensive level survey, this building is individually eligible. And the design of the building, the modern design, the era that it was built in, and this is a feature that was common in those type of buildings. And staff was of the opinion that this is a character-defining feature of that building, and we felt that we needed to present that to you all to try and save that particular feature, because once it's gone, it'll totally change the appearance of that building, and we didn't want to lose that feature. But we're just presenting that to you.
Yeah,
obviously.
there's the committee has previously adopted a resource called the Building Conservation Guidelines that talks about how existing buildings should be treated. Existing, not necessarily, quote, historic, but existing buildings, and that's where we get the guideline from. Unpainted masonry should not be painted. Existing window openings should not be significantly modified. Character-defining features should not be altered. So that's where all of that is coming from. And then we also have to look to the ordinance guidelines that talk about, promoting development in a diverse yet compatible manner. So, but that's where we pull that from.
Do we have any other questions for staff? If you could start by stating your name.
Troy Downing, Richard Brown Associates, RBA Architects, representing SK Industries on this project. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Board. As she stated, we are looking to develop this into a boutique hotel at this location, which the first floor will be a coffee shop, restaurant, bar. The first floor is existing as a parking garage. We will be revamping that area and doing an outdoor pool and bar area as part of the boutique hotel. Talking a little bit about the parking on the outside, we have applied through Stuart Chai with the traffic department for the 60-degree angled parking. We will be getting rid of the parking that is off-street parking that is in front of the vacant lot, and there is some parking in front of the existing apartment complex that we will be deleting that parking, adding green space in between the hotel and green space and trees in between the street, 8th Street, and the pool area. This will provide, I believe, I forget how many parking places there are. You've got 14 angled parking places in one ADA space that we will be proposing. That will obviously have to go through the Traffic Commission, which is in the process of doing now, and then through City Council for approval. Since this is in the downtown district, this does not hold us up from getting a permit because we are not required parking in this area. So we look for approval on that item. And in regards to the front area that is in question, the owner of this property has a sister property in LA that he's trying to make this look like. And what we're looking at doing is doing artwork. We have not gone through the Arts Commission yet because he's in the process of commissioning some people, so that artwork has not been done at this time, but we plan on coming back with artwork in this area and also in the pool area for a future approval. We're not going to be going for tax credits on this property. While I understand it's on it's been noted as with some significance, I feel this significance is very limited. One thing that we will have to be doing is the stair behind this is decrepit, needs replaced. We will be doing a lot of work around it. And we're looking at covering it so we can do some future really fun things with some artwork on this building and make it a more contemporary building that suits what's happening around this area. I'd like to take any questions you may have.
So have you given any thought to being able to maintain the facade that the staff feels can help preserve a part of the history of the architect in the area?
The owner does not believe that the mid-century feature works with the theme of his hotel and does not want to keep the feature.
Could you elaborate on what is the theme for his hotel in L.A.?
Well, it's a boutique-type hotel. It's going to be all painted white. It's going to be very contemporary. The rooms will be contemporary. The restaurant will as well.
But there is something, painted white, is there something unique about the theme of the existing hotel in L.A.?
Very clean lines,
Just clean
white and
lines.
black, yes. That's the main thing.
Well, personally, I think it is a very character-defining feature, and actually a feature that, from what I've seen here, would tie in well with the theme that's going on, and even more so referencing LA, where this type of CMU screen in mid-century buildings is prominent throughout LA. I think keeping it here on this building actually ties better to LA than covering it up. I agree with staff's position. I don't see a benefit to covering it up that outweighs the maintaining the character of the building. Also, the renovations to the building itself, I think are very nice. I think the project overall is very nice. The way the windows are being treated, changing some of the proportions that are there and adding some new windows in. But even with these renovations, this building is still mid-century. And so that CMU screen is a significant part of that, and in my opinion should be maintained.
I agree with Corey that keeping the screen would allow it to reference LA in a stronger way than what is happening here. I think there could be a way to combine the mural and the screen. Like, I'm just looking at the rendering, like the bottom part, which is like black. Maybe the screen just is maintained in some parts of it, but it's not the whole wall, so that you could combine the screen and the art. Or maybe if we continue this screen, when you come back with the art and we have a better idea of what that really is, then, maybe we could decide then that it was necessary to remove the screen or cover up the screen. But just seeing the blank wall that we have here, I'm also inclined to continue that one part.
Do we have any additional comments? So staff has recommended continuing this element of the building. I think some of the commentary that's heard is in line with that. You've referenced in your comments that the owner does not want to maintain the CMU screen. What are your current thoughts on the idea of continuing that item to work with staff to maintain the wall?
If we're just talking about the screen and letting the rest of the items pass so that we can go on to a permit phase, I would be fine with letting that move and the wall being contingent on us coming back with final artwork through the Arts Commission, if that's possible.
Okay, so from my perspective, what I just wanted to point out, so that doesn't mean you want to discuss potentially keeping all or part of the wall, correct?
I think those items can be discussed.
Okay,
yes.
okay, so it's still, okay, open. Just wanted to make sure.
And in our recommendation, we had suggested you could come back as soon as April. Do you think, but realistically speaking, do you think you need till May?
Are we just talking
Just
the
talking
wall,
about the wall.
approving the rest of the items
And-
as submitted?
We would need stuff by next Tuesday is the problem.
Yeah, that's
Okay, okay. So can we change our recommendation to continue that one item till May?
I think that'd be
Okay.
fine, Laura.
Do we have any additional comments, questions? Would anyone else in the gallery like to speak to this?
I have a comment. I know this is a design comment, but if you do choose, if we end up keeping part of the wall, it might be interesting to look at the brick and masonry that's in front of the pool and just think about the size, like the proportions of that brick and masonry to make it, each unit a similar proportion to the masonry on the wall, if you do end up going that route. But regardless, that's just something to think about to tie it together.
Okay.
I want to mention something. I have smaller kids that I'm trying to show them history throughout Oklahoma, and I'm like, hey, what else can we show them? So if you take away essential parts of buildings, then we can go back and reference, the old pictures. This is what it looked like before, and then the interesting part of how it was integrated to the new buildings. So I just wanted to point that out.
Thank you.
If there aren't any other comments or discussion, do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the application, except item 2B, main building, clad existing block on north facade with EIFS on both sides, on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District Zoning Ordinance as referenced in Section C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the applicant obtain approval from the Traffic Commission and City Council for the angled on-street parking, and continue item 2B, main building, clad existing block on north facade with EIFS on both sides to the May 2019 meeting, so that the applicant can explore leaving the decorative cutout CMU screen wall exposed on the north facade.
I'll second.
That was a Kriegel-Richards motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The application is approved with that condition. Moving on to item 6E, 401 Northwest 10th Street.
Uh-oh. Paula. Let's try that again. It looked like it had disappeared. Okay, there it is. You can sit or stand, whatever. So this is a request to renovate structure, which currently kind of just blends in. I actually had never noticed it before I had to go out there. And they're going to leave a retail space in it and then put in a restaurant and bar and have significant amount of outdoor seating area, which is proposed underneath in this area and then wrapping around, because their property line, the building is not on the property line. So I think it's an interesting project. One of the issues that we have to discuss is they need a variance for maneuvering in the right-of-way, because they don't really have a lot of places to put their dumpster. And they're proposing to put it in this area with the required screen. And so the trash trucks are going to be having to back out onto the roadway. So you will see that there's a condition in here requiring that they need they obtain a variance for maneuvering in the right-of-way. Staff is totally supportive of that because they really have no other option, and they're going to have to do something with their trash. So part of the sidewalk adjacent has been improved in this area, and obviously, as you can see, we're looking back toward St. Anthony's Hospital, and so they're going to be closing in the majority of this curb cut. They're leaving one small area and putting bollards so that we won't end up with cars pulling in it, because that was a concern. And so they'll have more of a defined walk path. We're going to end up with some more grass. We're going to end up with some street trees, which will help in that area. And down the one side in this area as well, they're going to be closing in curb cuts and adding grass, street trees. The only thing they're leaving is there is a relatively new trash can that DOKC put out. It's part of their improvement project, and that is actually mounted in the concrete. So that concrete's staying, but everything around it is going to be converted to grass. So obviously, we have the section that we talked about that they need the variance for, and staff has no issues at all with the proposal, and we recommend approval, subject to them getting the variance that they need for maneuvering in the right-of-way. And you will need a second motion, either supporting or hopefully supporting the variance. One of the features that they have, you're not going to see it that well. They call it a living wall, but it's not live. And I did some research, which is what you had. It looks pretty realistic to me, but it is going to be tucked back in, and I'll show you the actual location. I just got turned around. It's going to be tucked back in where the hand is in this area. It's going to be along here where they're putting some seating, and they're cutting it into the building, and then this back wall will have that material on it that they call a living wall, although it's not alive. And then they're going to have some significant signage on it. The signage here is going to definitely fit in with the Dust Bowl signs, which are right next door, because they're really similar to that. And Troy is also the architect for this case, and if you have any questions of staff. Yes.
I'm sorry. Could you point out again where the trash is going to be picked up on the site plan?
On the site plan? Okay,
Yeah.
let me get back. It's right, you see where my hand is? So it's in the very, the corner of the project, the northeast corner, and here's so the trash truck will be pulling in here and then having to back out. But you can see how much green we're getting all along the frontage, and on their landscape plan, which is in here somewhere, shows the trees that we're getting in this, and the plants that we're getting, and it's really going to enhance that corner, which is directly across where we get the pop-up shops at Christmas. We got Blue Garden, just half a block away. There's a lot of pedestrian traffic in this area, and I think this will just increase the pedestrian traffic.
And the signage, you pointed out the signage, that's within regulation size, right?
It is. It's within their allowable signage. If they did need to come to you just because the one is over 100 square feet, they don't need a variance for it, but it meets the code allowance for size of sign.
Okay.
Do we have any other questions for staff? Would the applicant like to present?
Once again, Troy Downing, 14918 Hertzquell Springs Parkway in Oklahoma City. We're Richard Brown Associates, representing SK Industries. This is going to be what a lot of people are considering a Dallas bar or backyard bar. This whole area in Midtown has become quite a hot spot with pedestrians in this area. This is going to add to the vitality of the area. This is a corner that's for some time not looked very good. This is going to have a lot of street interaction. The old building that used to be here was an old General Tire store, and it had a large awning on this, and that's been taken away some time ago. But with what we were doing with the garage doors, opening this up, kind of gives back that feel of what this corner was at one time. We are, as Laura said, doing a 180-style streetscape along here, which is going to really soften up the corner. We will be needing a variance for maneuvering in the right-of-way for the dumpster. Right now, trash is being picked up in the same area. There's a dumpster sitting there with no screen. So they've been doing this in this area for some time, and the past owners. But this will provide a screen in this area, and I think will be a safe place for them to do that maneuvering. So we hope for the recommendation for that variance to be approved through the variance board. Once again, we're just trying to create a lot of vitality in this area, and I think it'll be a fun space and really go well with, as you said, the Blue Garden to the west and Bachelor Hall to the east. There's a lot of other fun places that people are really flocking to in Midtown. So, any questions? We'd love to try to provide the answer.
I just have one question on the site plan. I believe it's on there, but is the dash line at the corner, is that the site triangle study?
That is the site triangle,
okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's all I wanted to know.
That corner has just been redone by the
yes.
city.
Do we have any comments or questions for the applicant? Or general discussion?
Yeah, I was going to say, great job. Very familiar with that area, and when I saw the plans for that, I was so impressed. I had to tell my wife, says, look what they're going to do in this area. I thought you guys really put a lot of thought into it, and I think it's going to be a nice addition to what's already occurring in that area, so kudos.
Thank you.
I guess I'll move to make an approval. So, okay. I will move to make an approval, to approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District zoning ordinance as referenced in section C and D of the staff report, with the condition that the applicant obtain a variance from the prohibition against parking or maneuvering in the public right-of-way, and provide...
We'll need a separate.
Oh, yeah.
Second.
That was a Richard Jones motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? That motion carries.
And I will provide a recommendation of approval to the Board of Adjustment for a variance from the prohibition against parking or maneuvering in the public right-of-way.
Second also.
As Richard Jones again. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Application is approved. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 6A, 1305 Classen Drive. I'll let staff introduce the project again.
I think you can go straight to
Okay.
Yes, we can.
Is this packet any different than the one we received the one today? Is this different than the one we received earlier?
Full signage, 11 by 17 packages, no different.
Okay, good. Just want to make sure there's something I'm not missing.
We just wanted to make sure you had the bigger quality images, not...
Good, thank you.
Sure. David Box, 522 Courtyard Drive, here on behalf of the applicants who are also here, Grant Willoughby and John Ridley, as well as the architects for the project. I want to thank Committee Member Jones. It was you that was very strong in your admonition to go and continue this, to allow further discussion and further thought. So I want the committee to understand that we took it very seriously. I hope that the seriousness that we took it are reflected in the design changes that you see. I do believe, aside from the height issue, I think we have answered and addressed through design revisions to the project every single question, concern that was raised. I'm going to let the architect walk through that step by step. Staff does a good job of laying out those changes beginning at page 2 into page 3 of the staff report. But again, I think that we were able to accommodate and specifically make changes that address the concerns that were raised. I want to focus mainly on the downtown development framework. Now, you're going to hear, I think, a lot about that from Mr. Work. He's going to hand you 2 exhibits that come from the framework. At the beginning, it's a map. I want to focus more on, before you get to that map, and the specific language in the framework, specifically at page 5 of the framework. I don't know if you have it with you. In case you don't, I'll simply read it to you. Page 5 at the beginning is entitled, "How is the Downtown Development Framework Used?" About halfway down, it's talking about the distinction between design standards and design guidelines. And then, within the body of that paragraph, in bold letters that are slightly bigger, says, by definition, guidelines are not mandatory or binding and should not be confused with standards or regulations. This is the text from the document that the opposition seeks to have as the smoking gun to say that this project is not compatible. Now, certainly it is within your discretion to decide whether or not this project is compatible based upon the ordinances. I don't think that the document that is a self-proclaimed non-binding document is the way to get there. Now, if you think about height, I want to focus on what staff has said about height. And I know a lot of time was spent talking about height, and I did my best to be as polite as possible by saying we're happy to go back to the drawing board and look at other changes except for height. That's just simply not on the table because we believe what we have in height is compatible. I happen to live on 15th Street in Heritage Hills, so I've tried to make a point since the February 21st hearing to really take different routes home and really pay attention to the area. And when you look at the staff report, that's what they talk about in terms of height is the area. And I think, I hope you would agree with me, when you drive the area, it is a diverse mix of buildings, both in types of use, in types of architecture, but in types of height, scale, and mass. So to suggest that this, because it's 8 stories, is out of context with the area, I think is just simply incorrect. I think the opposition wants the area to be defined as a postage stamp rather than what I think the area is, which is Midtown. And when you look at it in terms of Midtown, and specifically the 11-story building that has, I think, a couple of stories of penthouse that aren't counted as stories, I think it's like 50 yards from this site. Ms. Kriegel, you made a comment last time that, in your opinion, those were perhaps not comparable because of the use. The use was different. But if we think about what happens in old buildings, that 11-story tower that is currently, I think, some sort of medical office, there's nothing stopping that from becoming a residential tower. And so I don't think the use of the interior of the building is what makes it compatible or not compatible. I think it's the built environment. And when you look at the built environment of this area, the height is certainly compatible. Is it taller than some? Certainly. Is it not as tall as some? Yes. Is it as bulky as some? Perhaps. But it's also, I think, your comment, Ms. Richards, was because of the way that it is shaped, it's more elegant, and it isn't mass and bulk like you have at the edge, just, I think, 75 yards the other way from this project. And so when we look at the staff report and their analysis as to height, I think it highlights why Mr. Elliott came to the height in the design that he did, because when you look at this area, it is a diverse mix of both height and mass, and is, let me find staff's comments, compatible, this is at page 10. Given the diversity of development in this area, which also includes some very tall and substantial structures, staff believes that the proposed structure is compatible with the development in the surrounding area. So we believe that this development is compatible. Certainly staff does as well. They recommended approval the first go-around. The recommendation for approval hasn't changed. I'm going to, unless you want me to address some specifics on the variances, we did address those in depth last time. If anybody doesn't remember, I'm happy to do it again, but we do have a couple variance requests. We do have an item that we'll have to go to Traffic Commission on because of, there was a comment by the opposition about where's Cox Cable going to park and where are loading trucks going to park. We have now a loading drive that you can see on the screen right there in the slightly brown-colored brick or pavement that's just south of Classen Drive. So we would need a recommendation for the Traffic Commission as well. And I want to point out, last time you had some people from the public that were here. Some of them couldn't be here today. I hope you have all of the support letters we've had. In addition, we've got over 200-something signatures on a support petition. I think that this is publicly received widespread support. I think it's worth noting that the only people that don't support it are a competing developer across the street. But I think if you look generally at the public, people are supportive because I think this is the type of development that as a city, frankly, we were begging for 5 years ago. The idea that somebody would go build a multi-story, mid-rise, high-end condo project would have been a dream. And so the fact that we have that here, I think is something that we should really, focus on and take credit that we as a city are moving forward. I don't know if anybody else was at the chamber event yesterday where the 3 new council people spoke, but all of them spoke about the renaissance of Oklahoma City, specifically downtown, and how we keep that momentum going. Well, it's projects like this that keep the momentum going. I mean, you have to have a diverse type of projects to be able to keep that momentum going, attract young professionals to want to be in the downtown area, keep people from moving to the Dallases and the Kansas Cities and all those other markets that for generations the city has lost. These are the type of projects that people want. And I think we should be encouraging these projects rather than discouraging them because perhaps they're slightly different than other projects that might surround us. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I'm going to turn it over to Rand, but before I do, I want the committee members to hear from the developers of the project. I think that's important to be able to put a face with the project and understand that this is somebody's dream and vision, and a lot of money, a lot of effort has gone into getting it to this point, and we're asking you to allow us to take it to the next point. So with that, I'll have Grant and John.
Good morning.
Morning.
Grant Willoughby, 2000 Huntington Ave in Nichols Hills. My partner, John Ridley, and I are the developers for the Elliott. Every project we do starts with an inspiration, a spark. And the first time we saw 1305 Classen, we knew immediately what building deserved to be built there. We've now worked for a little over 9 months to design a building that is respectful, but also to introduce a new style of living to downtown and to build upon what is a pioneer spirit that Midtown has always represented. The downtown resurgence started in Midtown. And we feel that a project like the Elliott is the next evolutionary step in that direction. We're 30 units. We're not 300. And it gives more Oklahomans a chance to call Midtown home. John and I are both born and raised right here in Oklahoma City. We went to middle school together, been friends since then. But we also lived away from Oklahoma City for a little over 10 years. John was in Los Angeles. Myself, I was in Los Angeles and Nashville. So we had a chance to kind of live amongst developments that are similar to the Elliott and see the positive impact that they had on larger markets. I look to Nashville, I look to Austin, Texas for inspiration. I think 10 years ago, Nashville didn't have any developments like this. And now there are dozens. And the same in Austin. You see mid-rises, you see high-end luxury high-rises going up all over the place. And arguably, those are two of the most booming markets in the country. And we feel that Oklahoma City shares some of that same blood as Nashville and Austin. It's a great time to be here, and we feel it's the right time for a project like this. Ultimately, this is your decision, but if you give this project a chance, I promise you, we will not let you down. So, thank you.
Can I ask you a question real quick? Obviously, my concern is over the height. Okay. I don't have an objection to 1211 North Chartel because of its use. I have an objection to that because it stands so tall in the middle of just no more than 3-story high buildings. And that's my concern with your building. So I know the numbers have to work for you as a developer. So and I love the design, by the way, and I love the use. I think it's a great addition to the area. But have you considered a larger floor plate, shorter building, larger floor plate to make the numbers work for you?
We have explored all options, and we just feel that verticality is the future. There's a development in Nashville called the Appalachian. I left 7 years ago, it was just finishing. It was in the Midtown area of Nashville, much like our Midtown area. It is 17 stories, stands much taller than all the other buildings. But the way that it was designed, the way that it's built, much like the Elliott, it feels appropriate. And we feel that with the design here, with the site studies that we've provided, it's not an imposing mass. It feels like it belongs, and it's ultimately the design that we've landed on and that we're comfortable with. We didn't aim for 20 stories. We feel that 8 is the most appropriate number for this development. Any other question? Fran?
Rand Elliott, 425 Northwest 15th. I'm sorry we don't have a slide to illustrate this, but based on our conversation last about height and some things like that, how many of you ever have been by the Aberdeen? The Aberdeen is on 15th Street, right across from St. Luke's Methodist Church. It is 8 stories. The adjacent buildings are 2 stories and 3 stories. And it fits beautifully into the neighborhood. It's literally 2 blocks from where I live, so I go by it all the time. And like Kansas City, certainly like this example, it's really a great opportunity to see how a building at that scale fits into an existing neighborhood, and it really does. And in fact, I wish we could pull that image up. Laura, is there any way to do that? Can we do Google Earth or something? Oh, okay. Just a food for thought. But I think this would be a really great thing for you to see because I think it illustrates the fact that there's a real comfort level there. It has big trees around it. It does all those kinds of things that could be helpful.
I'm going to actually hold on doing that. I think if there's supplemental information to be provided, we can get to that when we need to. I don't want to derail the conversation.
No, I was just responding to
Sure.
the question and thought an example could be helpful to the group.
Sure.
So, first off, I guess I should say thank you for your time and what you do to represent the city and make this a better place. Today we're responding to the protest letter, in particular from Marva Eller, dated February the 11th, 2019, and all of the other concerns that have been voiced at that time. At the DDRC meeting on February the 21st, the city staff recommended approval, and based on the document that you have in the second
review dated March 1st. The staff also recommends approval. What I'd like to do is I would like to show images after my comments, because I think that seeing the images after that would be real helpful. So I'd like to start with comments in particular. And I'd like to start with reading what we would call the change summary. And there are 7 or 8 items that are this, which summarize the things that we've done. We, as was mentioned earlier, we really have taken all of the considerations into effect. We've dealt with every single one of the issues and redesigned and reimagined what we might do to make a solution that would not only benefit the developer and make the project go forward, but also be respectful and thoughtful about the neighborhood. The first one was a response to concerns about additional access into the building, which we have added. There is a plan in your packet that shows that we've done an access through the loggia into the courtyard and then into the building that would provide that access in itself into the courtyard and so forth. It would also allow vertical circulation access, and so we feel like that issue is taken care of. The second one is response to the concerns about loading zone. We've added a 14 by 48 foot long loading zone in the area with a curb cut near the front door that would allow the parking structure access drive. It would be further delineate the loading zone from the street, and it would achieve a softer look, if you will, to that question. It will allow us to do all the service and maintenance necessary with vehicles approaching or coming to the site. And I might just mention that I know of very few places, except a few hotels in Oklahoma City, that actually have this accommodation. So we feel like it's really an added benefit or an added feature that we've done in an effort to make the neighborhood feel better about our solution. This is not something that would be normally requested. The surface parking the parking structure door has been revised. It is now a sliding door with glass in it rather than overhead, and the panels have been configured as well. So we have listened to that comment and we've made design changes. There was also voiced concerns about windows in the parking structure which look into the dumpster area. What we've done is come up with a very exciting idea which makes the windows basically art elements. And we've also painted the inside of the parking structure, so when it is illuminated, there is some interest and excitement along the sidewalk as you approach in and around the building itself. There was a question about the parking structure that has been revised. I believe we have 75 parking spaces now. We'll come back to the images in just a moment. One of the other things that we did that you've seen in the images is we added a perimeter planting area at the top of the parking structure. 2 reasons for that: just to soften the edge, and it allowed us to do basically a screen that would just block the view to the upper part of the automobiles on the second level. We've added a linear LED light to uplight that, so it adds an architectural feature to the building as well. The parking structure canopies, even though we thought that the soft fabric versions were more compatible with the neighborhood, it was suggested from the opposition that we'd like to see something else, and so it has been redesigned to be a steel element that covers all the parking on the upper level. A dog run has been added. That was a question in the previous discussions behind the parking structure. What this will do is it will have to basically move the transformer to the corner of the parking garage, and we've taken that effect. We've also added in your packet of information a Solstice Study, which is a sun study that was requested to determine what the effect of the shadows of this building might be on adjacent structures and property, and as you can see from that, it's minimal. The Midtown Building Study, we actually went out and reviewed, surveyed, photographed, measured
many of the adjacent structures around this particular building to compare, and there's a graph that compares size and mass and square footage and relationship to street and so forth. It gives you a very comprehensive understanding about our sensibilities and sensitivities to what goes on around us. So those are a brief view of what the recommendations are. And what I'd like to do at this time is I'd really like to go over it in detail, because I think that by going over it in detail, you will really understand all of the specifics that the protest letter suggested, and we're trying to be very, very, very clear about our response to each and every one of those items. And so we feel like it's important for you to hear all of that, okay? This letter is a response to the comments by Marva Ellard with Villa Teresa Investments, LP. Our intent is to provide factual and supplementary information that provides a more complete understanding of the design of the proposed project. The City of Oklahoma City Zoning and Planning Code, Class and Drive, is the surrounding area and the Villa Teresa properties. The original letter from Ms. Ellard with numbers corresponding to the points below can be found at the end of this letter. So these are in the order in which they were looked at in the letter itself. The first comment was the height of the tallest new Villa Teresa building. The comment from the opposition was that the tallest new building will be 3 stories, about 36 feet. Our response in research tells us this. From the elevations of the ridge line of the Class and Flats, which are proposed as part of the Villa Teresa residence, appears to be approximately 50 feet above the elevation of the sidewalk at the intersection of Dewey and Classen. We have drawings, if you would like to see that, to illustrate that height. Number 2, a reference of summary item number 1, comment from the opposition. The 45-degree angled site is not unique. All lots that are along Classen Drive have the same characteristic. Our response, we agree that all the lots along Classen Drive are at a 45-degree angle. Our statement in the original submission that the site is unique was meant to contrast to the overwhelming majority of the streets in Oklahoma City, which are orthogonal. Number 3, height, scale, and number of stories. Comments from the opposition. The next tallest and most recent buildings include the Edge Apartments up to 5 stories and the Commons Apartments, also 3 stories. The design concept is not respectful of the neighborhood context, primarily due to the height, scale, and the number of stories. Our response. The City of Oklahoma City Zoning and Planning Guide states that there is, quote, unlimited height for building in this district. In the code, the city also states that the first 2 floors of new construction shall be placed at or within 10 feet of the street right-of-way. Upon discussion with the city, we were advised that the preference from the city is for new construction to be placed on the property line. This project complies with the height and setback requirements as stated in the City of Oklahoma City Zoning and Planning Code. We believe that, quote, the neighborhood context is more than just the immediate block. Midtown and the surrounding areas boost a diversity of buildings and a lesser scale and of greater scale and similar scale to this project. Data was collected for the 7 largest, tallest, and largest footprint buildings within 2 blocks of the site. That's the graph I mentioned to you earlier. Taking into consideration the proximity to street, width of street, size of building footprint, and delta between the height of the building and the average height of the surrounding buildings. The proposed project is less imposing to its surroundings and thus more appropriately scaled than 6 of the 7 buildings for which the data was collected. You can reference those drawings as well. Number 4, elevational planes. The question was, a comment from the opposition, the lack of variation in the elevational planes does not blend well with the majority of the existing building, which have highly varied and articulated detail. Our response, the neighborhood context is considered more than the immediate block. Midtown today includes new and old buildings that do not exhibit highly detailed facades with elevational changes. Even on the immediate block, the St. Anthony Foundation, AIA Central Oklahoma, and the Healthy Heartbeat buildings possess little or no variation in the elevational plane. These buildings, as well as Boulder Energy Solutions, also exhibit very little, quote, varied and articulated facades. Our intention is not to replicate, I want to emphasize the importance of this, it's not to replicate history or old buildings. That would be creating fake history. That's not the appropriate solution here in this neighborhood, but rather to create something that respects that history and engages the future. Two very important pieces of puzzle for this site. The proposed project is similar to the planned class and flats and Dewey townhouses, part of the Villa Teresa development, of course, in that it is not a historic match and has modern elements. So we're doing basically the same kind of approach to this project. The simplicity of the facade is not due to a lack of attention, but rather a vision for the project. Lastly, the City of Oklahoma City Zoning and Planning Code does not state a requirement for a preference for a specific level of variation in the elevational planes, nor a level of variation or articulations in the facades of that project. Not required. The brick or masonry. The comment from the opposition. The description mentions a historic wing. However, the documents fail to present a part of the building that responds to the description. This is an important word. Tumbled brick is not a historic material and is not appropriate and does not approximate the appearance of the historic brick. Well, first off, it's very important to know definition. Nowhere in any of the documents that we submitted do we refer to the masonry as tumbled. Tumbled is a residential term. You can go and buy tumbled brick someplace. Nowhere at any time did we refer to the masonry of this project as tumbled. In fact, it's antique brick. It's 120 years old. It is far more authentic than some of the brick that we already have in and around our community. The description of the use of the word traditional was really not meant to be literal. Instead, it's used to, in essence, contrast with the modern wing in the same building. We're trying to give people an understanding about what they're looking at, that there are two pieces or two parts to this particular building. The modern wing with its glass looks literally towards downtown and symbolically towards the future, which is really the whole point, while the historic wing is basically an homage to the more traditional and largely brick and historic buildings in the neighborhood. Number 6, the accuracy of the renderings. The opposition has suggested that the three-dimensional renderings demonstrate that the proposed building would be looming over Villa Teresa, and if you look up the definition of looming, it's something dark and scary and overhanging, and as you can tell, the building that we're proposing is none of those comments or none of those descriptions. Most roofs in the vicinity are sloped, including all but one at Villa Teresa buildings, the Unitarian Church, and the historical residences now used as commercial properties. This style of rendering makes the existing buildings appear more massive than they really are. In contrast with all of these existing buildings in the foreground of the renderings, they appear to be more massive than the more distant appearances of the proposed building. Please see the attached superimposed images for a more realistic comparison. There's an interesting sort of flaw or misunderstanding here. Our response is simply this. As outlined in response 3 above, the proposed project meets all the codes related to size, scale, setback, et cetera, and less imposing to its surroundings than most of the other buildings in Midtown. Of the 9 renderings from the original submittal that show surrounding buildings, 8 show the proposed project closer or as close as most, if not all, of the surrounding buildings. The one outlier is the view southeast towards downtown, in which the proposed project is centered amongst all surrounding buildings. Regarding the buildings superimposed on the elevations, the scale of the 4 of the 5 renderings are shown incorrectly. They are not in proper scale. And so we have gone back and put the proper scale drawing on those individuals so that you can really see that they are not as tiny as the first round appeared. They are really larger in reality. If you assume that there are 6-inch steps, that would make the floor-to-floor height 7 feet, which is not possible. In our estimation, the ridge line of the roof of this building is closer to 37 feet above the ground. Similarly, the ridge of the superimposed northwestern part of the Villa Teresa Future Hotel is shown as 30 feet above the ground. That's impossible. In our estimation, the ridge is closer to 42 feet above the ground, i.e. 12 feet taller than represented. The lone building shown is the correct size that the attached garage located on the rear of the Villa Teresa property and behind one of the future hotel buildings. In addition to the scale being inaccurate in many of the photos, the lower half of the vehicles parked on the street are not shown. This misrepresents the total height of the superimposed buildings compared to the proposed project, since the proposed elevation markers are measured from the top of the sidewalk. In reality, the superimposed images should be moved up a few feet so that the sidewalk match, thus giving a proper datum line for comparing total heights. It is worth noting that from the elevations, the ridge line of the Classen Flats, which are proposed as part of the Villa Teresa residences, measures approximately 50 feet above the elevation of the sidewalk at the intersection of Dewey and Classen. The garage door. Comments from the opposition. The garage door is very wide and typical of a more commercial property. There are no similar features in this block of Classen Drive. Our response: since the block is not a historic district unto itself, but rather part of a larger urban midtown district, this project was designed with more than just this block of Classen Drive in mind. In an effort to be a good neighbor, the garage door has been changed and revised, as I suggested earlier. The next comment was about from the opposition was about the historic wing. We are specific. What are the specific historic qualities? Brick is not the same as historic building. Our comment is that the description of a historic or traditional wing is not meant to be literal, but in effect intended to be a contrast, to denote a contrast with the modern side of the building. The modern wing, with its glass facade looking literally towards downtown, it's perpendicular and sited on the Devon Tower, symbolically towards the future, features a counterpoint, while the historic wing as an homage to the more traditional and largely brick and historic buildings in the neighborhood. So it's really intended to be sympathetic and thoughtful about the history in the neighborhood as well. The question about setback. The opposition suggests the 10-foot setback is inconsistent with the existing properties on both sides of Classen, even though it may be permitted in general in Table 7200.2. This will drastically disrupt the rhythm of the street and should be prohibited. And here is our response. As stated in the comment from the opposition, the proposed location of the building is permitted by the City of Oklahoma City Zoning and Planning Code. Additionally, building to the property line was advised and preferred by the city when the early concepts were discussed. The property line is 30 feet from the street. This would not be the first property built to the property line. Classen Commons, adjacent to Villa Teresa, is also built to the property line 30 feet from the street. So this is not a new precedent. We're following other things that are happening there. You'll also notice that the proposed development for the Villa Teresa residences calls out for a plaza courtyard and retaining wall with guard railing, covered entry stoop in the edge of the building structure for the Classen Flats to be located on the property line about 30 feet from the street. This is the exact same dimension that the proposed 1305 Classen Drive is located off the street. Similarly, the retaining wall for the Dewey Flats is built on the 15-foot off the street on the property line. The brick pilasters in front of the Villa Teresa planned future hotel site, Lowry House, and Schoolhouse Flats are located about 23 feet 10 inches off the street, and the retaining wall in front of the Reagan Smith Energy Solutions and Land Scout is located 25 feet off the street. As one walks the sidewalks at Classen Drive, the existing retaining walls, fences, and buildings define the boundary between public and private property. Not only do we disagree with this comment, with the statement that it makes a drastic disruption of the rhythm of the street, we feel that, in fact, it is in keeping with the existing and proposed elements of the street, and that it continues the pattern of defining the public-private threshold by having a presence on the property line at roughly the same dimension as already there. Number 10, comment from the opposition. 1300 Classen Drive Convent, the square footage compared to the convent is the comment. From the information that we found, the convent has a square footage of approximately 25,335, about 8,345 square feet per floor. This is one of the largest historic buildings in the immediate vicinity. The proposed development has a 10,250 square foot for the residential building, but a total square footage of about 77,000. This is 3 times the total convent square footage, which includes the 1967 addition. Our response. As outlined in response 3 above, the proposed project meets all the codes relating to the scale, size, setback, etc., and are less imposing of its surrounding than those most other large buildings in Midtown. Reference the response 3 again, the northwestern building of the Villa Teresa future hotel site, which is correctly referred to as the convent, has a gross building area footprint of 9,334 square feet per the county assessor. This does not include the attached garage. With a footprint of 10,250, the ground floor of the proposed project is merely 9.8% larger than the convent. The width of the 3-story portion of the convent facing Classen is 114 feet. The width of the 8-story portion of the proposed project facing Classen is 81 feet, less than 2/3 of that of the convent. The immediate vicinity is a subjective term, obviously. We would say that the 11-story physicians and surgeons building, which is less than 100 yards away from our site, is in the immediate vicinity. The 7-story Ambassador Hotel and the 6-story Sieber Hotel are only 2 blocks away. That is in the vicinity. Compared to the convent, another comment from the opposition, the parking garage structure is nearly double the footprint of the convent. Together, the garage and the proposed building are 3 times the footprint of the convent building, including the 1967 addition. Our response. The county assessor identifies the convent as having 9,334 square feet on the ground floor, gross building area. In addition to the gross building area, there is a 1,176 square foot attached garage, making the footprint for the convent 10,510 square feet rather than the about 8,344 per floor stated in item 10. Additionally, in comparison to what has been made, which includes both the proposed parking structure and the proposed residence building, then it seems logical that the comparison be made with the combined existing and proposed Villa Teresa properties rather than just the convent. And below that, you can see kind of the calculations and how we arrived at that conclusion. The next comment was that the Villa Teresa campus, the Elliott proposals need to be evaluated in relationship to the specific details in the existing neighborhood, which is not changing anytime soon. Our comment, as outlined in response 3 above, the proposed project meets all the codes relating to the size, scope, setback, etc., and is less imposing to the surrounding than most of the larger buildings in Midtown. While we were not able to check find listing on the county assessor's site for properties 4, 5, and 6, we were able to find listings for properties 1, 2, and 3. In addition to the 23,335 square feet, applying for the variance in the structure would be 17 feet rather than the required 30 feet. The reduced, I skipped one page. The convent has also attached garage and finished basement, which are 1,176 square feet and 3,127 square feet respectively, putting the total at 29,638 rather than 25,335. For property 2, in addition to the 7,478 square feet, the nursery also has a 500 square foot attached garage, increasing that square footage to 7,978. It is unclear as to whether the properties 4, 5, and 6 are accurate. Another item missing from the list is the Villa Teresa proposed development of the Classen Flats and Dewey townhouses at the intersection of Classen and Dewey Avenue. The net square footage of the 16 units is between 1,720 and 2,548 net square feet. This does not include garages, services spaces, and circulation. The opposition has stated that the neighborhood is not changing anytime soon. The proposed flats and townhouses by Villa Teresa Investments stand in direct contradiction to that statement. Number 13, appropriate to the neighborhood. Comment from the opposition. The difference between the proposed 8-story building and the Villa Teresa is too abrupt for this area in DDT 1. Our response, the proposed project has received a tremendous amount of support from the community. A few examples can be found in the resubmitted package. The Downtown Design Review Committee staff has recommended approval for the application under the condition that variances are granted and obtained. There was also a question about waste collection. The comment was, Villa Teresa is not interested in having a 4-yard dumpster for the 30 to 42 proposed housing units in the small acreage rolled out to the Classen Drive for service. This would have a negative visual impact on the lower density neighborhood. Our response, we listened. The waste collection service will retrieve the dumpsters from inside the parking structure, not outside, inside the parking structure, empty them, and then replace them when they are finished. The dumpsters will never be set out on the street. The resubmittal package includes a letter from the owner of Junk Boss outlining this process. Number 15, surrounding buildings. Comment from the opposition. All the non-originating buildings cited in the applicant's descriptive narrative are 3 stories or less. The footprint of each of these individual buildings is much smaller than the proposed condominium and garage buildings. Our response, as outlined in response 3 above, the proposed project meets all the codes relating to site size, setback, etc., and is less imposing to its surrounding and most of the other large buildings in Midtown. The portion of the narrative below in the above referenced portion describes 11 and 12-story buildings and that are 1 and 2 blocks away, respectively. Number 16, question about the footprint of Villa Teresa buildings. Comment from the opposition. All the buildings historically associated with the Villa Teresa property are 3 stories or less with significantly small footprints than the proposed condominium and garage. Our response. Please reference response 10, 11, and 12 above in conjunction with this, comparing the 2 buildings of the proposed project with the singular building from Villa Teresa. The opposition statement historically associated with Villa Teresa property would seem to exclude Villa Teresa's investments, proposed development of the Classen Flats and the Dewey townhouses. It is unclear from the renderings how large the footprint of the proposed development, which fronts Dewey and stretches across the property line almost continuously from Classen Drive and the Dewey entrance to the First Unitarian Church. Number 17, height of the existing buildings, the surrounding buildings. Comment from the opposition. The size of the St. Anthony campus has much less of an impact on the Villa Teresa district and surrounds. At no more than 5 stories, the edge is 3 stories less than the proposed development. Our response, we are not aware of a Villa Teresa district. The proposed project was designed with consideration not only for the 1300 block of Classen, but with all the Midtown and the surrounding areas in mind. Indeed, the edge is technically 5 stories. However, as one can see from the Midtown building study, the portion of the edge that fronts 12th Street has an additional 2-story structure that is visible from Dewey. In addition to the 2-story roof structure, the first floor of the southwest corner of the building is 5 feet or so above the sidewalk, giving the appearance of a building taller than 5 stories. Also, this building is set only 15 feet off of Dewey, and there is no landscape zone. These are the 2 facades of the edge that will be the most visible from Villa Teresa's existing and proposed property. It should also be noted that view of the proposed project from Villa Teresa is largely shielded by existing mature trees currently growing on the property. In addition, with the proposed building project being located 30 feet from the street, the trees proposed for the landscape zone, the building will be even more concealed. And I'll illustrate that with some images in a moment. Number 18, Questions about the parking structure. Comment from the opposition. Although surface parking is not always viewed as a positive thing, it is appropriate with a lower density of the established development of the Class and Drive landscape. The overall feeling is one of open space. The idea of the garage structure for the proposed development is realistic. However, the design of the Class and Drive facade is incompatible with the existing building development and reinforces the proposed project's incompatibility in this context. Our response: the parking structure is 2 levels with 17-foot parapet height. The City of Oklahoma City Zoning and Planning Guide requires buildings to be 2 levels. They have to be 30 feet in height. We're actually suggesting to get a variance to reduce the height, to reduce the mass, and make it more open for the neighborhood. We would be applying for a variance to do that. The reduced height improves views and hides the parking from public view. Thus, the parking structure serves to enhance the purpose of the ordinance by providing vertical character for the project's parking that would not otherwise be required. The windows of the parking structure will be accompanied by shades that will have art elements. The top of the parapet will have a planter. So hopefully what I've been able to illustrate is that we have listened very carefully, we've responded, we've been thoughtful about not only the historic nature of it, but trying to find solutions that we felt like were appropriate for this particular project. And so at this time what I'd like to do is to go through very quickly the images and illustrate some of the comments I've made today. Obviously, excuse me. Scott, yeah, please. This was resubmitted on March 11th. So, yeah, just click through. So we all know where the site is. This gives you an aerial view of its proximity. The Commons is the building on the lower right, the lower right that is built to the property line. Next. This gives you, again, just a proximity and a relationship. You can see that the orientation of the glass side is, in fact, inspired by the access and visual connection to downtown, and in particular the Devon Tower. This is a site plan. All of the comments in red illustrate the changes that we've made. Everything from the drop-off or location, Scott, can you point? Yeah. For delivery trucks or something, they can actually get off the street onto a pad in that location. We've shown the dog walk area. We've shown where the transformer would be, and the trash would actually be inside the building up in this particular corner. So I think that we've answered all of the questions that relate to those things and hopefully answered them appropriately. Next. In particular, the upper drawings, this is a revised plan that we did to illustrate this notion about service. And so you actually would park on the street. Scott, can you go up and show to the right of the next drawing? Yeah. The street would be up at the diagonal. And so a delivery truck would park there, would come through the loggia and into this courtyard and then into a service corridor to get access to the elevators themselves. This would be a very traditional way to do this and certainly not offensive to anybody, whether they're parked on the street or entering and leaving the building. Next. It just gives you an overview. You can see that we've changed the soft canopies on the roof deck of the parking structure to be steel. We've tried to make them very discreet and architecturally compatible with the surroundings. You can see the dog walk. Scott, you can right there. The transformer's over in that far corner. Gives you a sense of orientation. Simply a view looking, if you will, to the northwest along Class and Drive. This illustrates the diagonal. You'll also notice that this discussion about setbacks and so forth, if you look on the right, the pilasters and the fence and so forth, these are all at roughly 30 feet, 25 to 30 feet, which is what we're proposing the other side would be. So it would be compatible within the confines of the consideration and of the neighborhood. Another view literally from Villa Teresa looking across the street. This illustrates the new planter on the top to help soften that edge, be a little more friendly, and to help hide some of the automobiles on the top. You can see that we've changed the garage door. They're sliders, not a rolling door, and with wonderful windows, and so it feels like it has street presence. We've added a door through the loggia that is the delivery door, if you will, and the parking area for delivery vehicles right there. Just orienting, just kind of give you a sense of the perimeter of the building. On the left is the parking structure, and you see the structural elements there. You can see that it's light and airy to allow view and so forth to go through. It's not a big, massive element. See lots of landscaping there. This is a great example of this notion about being sympathetic to the historic side of the neighborhood, if you will. All of these windows are based on the golden ratio, golden section, which was created in 35 BC by Vitruvius. And it is a proportion of 1 to 1.618, and it's really about balance and proportion and scale, and that's what makes historic buildings particularly satisfying when you see them together. You can see that there's an operable section, a small operable section on each one of the windows. Next. One of the things, Mariana, that you brought up in our previous meeting was a concern about security and so forth, and we've been very, very thoughtful of that. I'm going to show you an example that illustrates the quality of the light that's going on along the street and give you a sense of that. This is basically, in essence, the 30 feet, if you will, that shows you the relationship between the curb and the building. You can also see, Scott, if you'll point to the drop-off area right there, and then the access into the courtyard would be along that particular way. Okay. So the next image is the front door. Simple canopy just defining the front door. There'll be a gate there that will have security buzzer and so forth. So there's likely to be, there would be cameras and all of those kinds of things necessary to keep everybody safe and secure as they come and go, or even if they're moving along in the street. And so we think that the addition of this, which is nothing now, has brought a very important piece of the security issue to fore, because we will now be able to monitor what goes on in and around the neighborhood, certainly for the benefit of Villa Teresa, but also for the adjacent street as well. This is the courtyard. We wanted to show this to show you that we've added the service door right there, and then it comes over to the right-hand side and goes into the service corridor of the building itself. Our courtyard, the hope of growing vegetables and flowers and that sort of thing would be quite wonderful for the residents. A simple view of it at dusk. Sorry, these aren't reproducing very well, but I hope there's another image. We've shown that something really fun and interesting would be to paint the inside of the parking structure. It's going to have lights on all the time, and so we thought it would be really cool to have colored walls and some things really make it feel like an art gallery. There you see it better. You can see we've got purple and green and blue for purposes of discussion, and then over on the right-hand side you see the shades that are actually hiding the dumpster location and where that would be, and so we've made those artwork as well. So you have this almost gallery-like feeling as you were to traverse up and down Classen Drive. So we think this is really cool and adds a nice quality to it. Scott, I think there was, yes, this is the one that was important. This is the one that we did specifically for you to answer your question. The lights were down a little bit. You could see the brightness. We've got significantly more light here than the city typically requires, which is 1/2 of a foot candle on the sidewalk and street areas, which is what typical light fixtures do. And so this gives you an example. We've got light above the parapet, if you will, of the parking structure, and just below the plantings. And so it's there to accent that, but it's also there to give some lighting at the top of the building. So if there's someone up there, you could certainly see them by having this light. The light from the gallery windows are shown here. The street lighting is shown here. And to our way of thinking, this would be a very pleasant and very safe place to be in addition to having cameras available for this. In fact, I wish that others in the neighborhood would adapt this idea and consider landscape lighting and security and that sort of thing to make it a better place. A view from across the street. We should have shown this on St. Patrick's Day, I guess. Again, kind of gives you a sense. What's important about this drawing was so often when you don't do drawings with context, you're not quite sure what you're seeing. And there was comments and questions about, oh, well, this will be an imposing building and will be a detraction for my building and my space and so forth. And what we want to illustrate here, we actually went out and measured these trees, height and width. And so these are real. This is what's really going on here. We have basically 52-foot trees that are out in this particular area. And so this is literally what the view would be from the Villa Teresa Hotel, I believe. Right, Scott? Looking across at this location. To my way of thinking, this feels wonderful. It feels like a real neighborhood. You have trees, you have landscape. It seems like a great place that you would enjoy living or convening with your neighbors along the way. Next. There was also a question that the view to the parking structure from the third floor of the proposed hotel would be something garish and awful. What you find out in reality is that these two big trees almost completely cover the parking structure itself. Even though we think the parking structure is beautiful, there are some wonderful structural elements up on the roof that are light and airy. This is really a realization of what's really there for this view. And to my way of thinking, this is not an unpleasant view. This just illustrates the heights. You can see Scott's showing there the colored light in the garage portion, the landscape on the upper level. Next. From the rear, if you will, from the side. Okay. The comment about the tumbled brick, this is the 120-year-old brick on the right. It's not tumbled. Tumbled brick usually has soft edges because it's been put in a big barrel and rotated to have all the edges chip off. A detail of the parking garage entry and canopy. Next. I think that's it. I'm happy to answer questions and hopefully clarify any of those things. I hope that what you saw was the thoroughness and the sensitivity that we provided to the opposition to try to answer questions and to show that we're sensitive and serious about trying to do something really good here.
Thank you.
I must have just worn you out. I'm sorry if I did that, but hopefully it was helpful. Thank you.
I'll be real brief in closing, and I do want to thank you for allowing Rand to do that. I thought it was important, based upon the comments we had last time, that we could respond to each and every comment that the opposition has made. I want to close with, when you look at 7200.1 and the ordinance, it's the downtown design districts, and subsection A is entitled Purpose and Intent. The purpose and intent, and I'm going to read it verbatim, the commercial district is intended to support diverse forms of business and residential activity. Specifically built into the code is this idea of supporting diverse styles of buildings. And so the idea that this is taller than what's across the street or the setback is different than what's across the street is frankly directly counter to what the purpose and intent of the downtown design districts want. They want diversity. And so I believe this building, with the 8 stories, is different from across the street. However, it is compatible because it adds to that diverse mix of residential buildings as contemplated in the code. We would ask for your approval as consistent with the staff's recommendation on the basis that it complies with the regulations and guidelines of the downtown design district zoning. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the applicant team? Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this? If you can start by stating your name.
Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, my name is Kelly Work, and my address is 105 North Hudson, Suite 304. I'm here representing the owners of the Villa Teresa property. That is, they are the Villa Teresa Investments LP and Villa Teresa Residences LP. And before we begin, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, we would like to request and suggest a brief recess. We're happy to proceed if that's what you would rather have us do, but it just seemed like it might be appropriate given the amount of time that we've been seating here already this morning.
Yeah, I agree that can be, that's a good idea. So let's take a 5-minute recess, and we'll come back to this.
Work, and I'm here representing the owners of the Villa Teresa property, which consists of about 3.5 acres, and it's directly on the east side of Classen Drive across from the subject property. And with me here today are Marva Ellard, Jeff Irwin, and Billy Woodring, representing the two owners of the Villa Teresa property. That property, of course, and just to recap briefly, consists of what was the former Villa Teresa school and convent buildings. They plan to preserve those existing buildings, to renovate them, and then they also will be constructing new townhomes along Dewey and residential flats as well, and that is in process presently. None of the buildings on the Villa Teresa property, either existing or the new proposed buildings, will exceed 3 stories in height. We do remain opposed to this application, even with the revisions that have been presented since the meeting in February, and I'll talk about some of those specific revisions in a moment. But we believe that this 8-story building with structured parking would be a significant departure from both what the framework guidelines provide for this area and from the ordinance guidelines, and that it would not be consistent with the context of this 4-block area. And I provided to you, just for your convenience again, copies of those relevant pages from the framework, which you should have in front of you. The first that I want to again mention is pages 9 and 17, which categorize this particular 4-block area between 11th and 13th Street and Dewey and Chartel as part of the general urban district. And then on the second page of that exhibit, which is page 17 from the design framework, it indicates that mid-rise residential, which it is categorized as 6 stories and above, is not considered compatible with the general urban district that applies to this entire 4-block area, nor is multifamily residential with structured parking. What is considered appropriate is multifamily residential, walk-up type multifamily residential that would consist of 2 to 4 stories. The second page that I have again provided to you is page 18 from the framework, where this 4-block area has been designated as low-density flex, which contemplates that the uses may flex between residential and commercial and provides for a target density of 2 to 3 stories. And both the edge on the east side of Dewey and the lift on the west side of Chartel have been referenced in the applicant's comments. And I just wanted to mention that the framework does designate those areas, both where the edge is located and where the lift is located, for high-density residential. They are in a different category entirely under the framework guidelines. And of course, the framework was adopted with this committee in mind by the Planning Commission and by the City Council only in 2015, so they're relatively new, and it was done for the downtown area in order to provide guidance for this committee in connection with its review and approval process for both public and private projects that are proposed for the downtown area. And under the ordinance, the committee is given discretion to apply the guidelines and make a determination as to whether or not a particular proposed project is appropriate within a specific location, given the context of the area and of downtown as a whole. So the guidelines that are set forth both in the ordinance and the framework are to be considered together with the development regulations that are specified. And the guidelines address specific streets and specific sub-areas within the downtown district as distinct from the development regulations for the downtown districts as a whole, which apply, like, for example, the DT1 district regulations apply to every DTD1 zoned property, and then the guidelines may apply more specifically to specific streets and specific areas within the downtown area. And it is incorrect to state, in our view, as the applicant contends, that the development regulations control to the exclusion of the guidelines. If that were the case, then there would be no purpose to be served by this committee and by this certificate of approval process that the ordinance has set up, that the City Council has created with the adoption of the ordinance, the adoption of the guidelines, and the creation of this review committee for projects within the downtown area. In our view, the height that is proposed for this specific project is out of context for the area and would detract from the surrounding properties. None of the buildings within this 4-block area between 11th and 13th and Dewey and Chartel exceed 3 stories, so this would be a significant departure from what is existing. The setback also at the property line would also be out of character for the area and would be a real departure from the setback that is established with the existing buildings along Classen Drive, both north and south. The front walls of this proposed building, which would be at the property line, if we understand correctly, are proposed to be 17 feet high at the south end and 14 feet high at the north end. So that's going to be a pretty severe, in our view, streetscape to have a 17-foot high wall at the south end of the property at the property line, and it then decreases, as we understand, to 14 feet at the north end. We're concerned also with the garage entrance still at the property line, directly off of Classen Drive, that it would not allow adequate stacking of vehicles that are going in and out of the facility. If a parking garage were determined to be appropriate at this location, our suggestion would be that they plan some sort of a service drive maybe at the north end of the property and get the garage door off of Classen Drive. It would be out of character from the more residential park-like feel that exists there today. We have the same view of the new proposed loading zone. We think that is not appropriate for Classen Drive in this stretch between 11th and 13th Street, that it would be more in character for the urban core, and that to have this on-street paved loading zone there directly in front of the building on Classen Drive would be a detriment for the area. We still have concerns about the parking structure and what is proposed in terms of the carport metal structures that are now proposed instead of what was previously proposed as a canvas-type material. We don't think that it is appropriate for the area and also is not in keeping, in our view, with the finish level that the applicant has indicated they are intending for this particular building. This building as proposed would significantly alter the character of the area along Classen Drive and for this entire four-block area, and in our view would adversely impact our properties and the other properties in that area. I think it's important to consider the significance of the and the purpose of the guidelines that were adopted by the Planning Commission and Council that are set forth both in the ordinance and in the downtown framework. And if the determination is made to disregard what those guidelines recommend, I think that needs to be done carefully and thoughtfully, because there will likely be other applications to follow, and those were the guidelines that were put in place after careful consideration back in 2015, and were done as to provide some guidance for this committee from that time going forward. So we would ask you to give that some, as we know you will, careful consideration. We would request that you deny this application as it's presently proposed. I'm happy to answer any questions. I do want to, if you don't have questions of me, I want to call on Marva Ellard. She has some additional comments that she would like to make. Thank you.
Marva Ellard. Kelly's a little taller than I am, I'm sorry. Marva Ellard, 1521 North Chartel Avenue, Villa Teresa Investments LP and Villa Teresa Residences LP. I would just like to clarify a few points that have been said. We are absolutely, as an ownership group, pleased that the applicant wants to build high-end for sale housing on that site. We without a doubt think that that is the highest use for that site. It is not the use that they propose, but the building that they propose that we have issues with. Just to give you a little bit more information about some of the things that have been discussed so far today. The tallest building on our property would be the convent, and according to Mr. Elliott, it's probably 42 feet tall, and I can believe that it's probably 42 feet tall, but the Elliott is 115 feet tall. So that, to me, is a drastic difference in height. They have substantial square footage. I might have missed that number in the discussion, but Rand, what's the square footage of the whole property? The whole buildings? Not ours, I can give you the square footage.
If you could just maintain your comments and your discussion to the committee.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Bass.
No?
The total Villa Teresa project, when completed, will be about 100,000 square feet. That includes the new construction on Dewey, the new condos on Dewey and Classen Drive, and rehabbing all the existing buildings. We have 3.5 acres. The Elliott sits on about 1 acre. So to me, that is a drastic difference in density and size on two different sites. there was a question about our townhouses on Dewey. Most of you are familiar with that part of town. Some of you might have even gone to school at Villa Teresa. The retaining wall on Dewey, it has been existing since the teens or 20s when there were single-family residences down that street. We're keeping that wall. We're rebuilding, but we're keeping that wall. But we did set our townhouses back a little bit, but we're also close to the edge, so we wanted to have something in common with them as far as setbacks and how things aligned from the street. But we did want our townhouses to have a little bit of a front yard. The same on the condo flats at Dewey and Classen Drive. That retaining wall has been there for close to 100 years. The setback that Mr. Elliott referred to is our fence. I mean, you can see through that fence. You can see the grass, you can see the trees, you can see the buildings in the back. It is not a building line per se. It is not a solid structure set on that line. It is a fence, and it's a historic feature of that property. We don't expect them to set their building back as far as the villa buildings are set back. We would just like them to consider setting the building back more than it is, so it is in somewhat in keeping with its surroundings. There is a pending National Register district for all of the villa properties and the First Unitarian Church. We're submitting drafts back and forth with the State Historic Preservation Office. All the properties have been deemed eligible. We haven't settled on a name for it yet, but I think as of yesterday, a draft has probably been submitted to Katie Friddle at the city for the item to be on most likely the May agenda of the HP Commission for recommendation for approval at the city level. It's already been deemed eligible at the state level. So the addition that all of this sits in is a very small addition called Classen's Marquette. It was a small addition when it was platted, and there's not very much of it left. And what is left is the villa properties, the church, some of the houses on the west side of the Elliott site, and the Maney district that sits kind of behind the Elliott and just right on Chartel. So the original addition was very small. There was more to it, but not much of it remains in somewhat its original configuration except that part. And so that to me is the context of this building. I mean, we can debate what context is till the cows come home, and we're all going to have a different definition of what context is, but our definition of context is that specific area. You know, I don't dislike this building. I dislike this building in that site. It is, and I'll stand by my word looming. You know, there was a slide that was up on the board. Paula, can we find that again? It's looking, Laura, are you driving? Yes, just a few minutes ago. It was a view down Classen Drive, looking northwest on Classen Drive.
Yeah, we've got those in front of us as well.
So that was, and when that popped up, I was like, that looks looming to me. It dwarfs us. It dwarfs everything around it. No, other way. And we can talk about trees blocking views, and we can talk about things like that. Those trees don't always have leaves on them, you know, and you're standing on the front porch of the villa, you're going to be impacted by that building. I think there's a lot of ways that they could use that site to get the density that they would like, but that doesn't have to be as tall as this building. And I don't think that that's been fully explored. I understand that that's their first choice on what they would like to build, and we appreciate the effort that they went to address some of our comments and concerns, but I think in our minds, it comes down to great site, wrong building for that site. And when I read the ordinances and the framework, it gives you all the discretion to make that decision. And it also says that it should ensure compatibility with its surroundings, which I don't think this building is compatible with its surroundings. And it should enhance existing public spaces. It just, to me, is out of place in this site, and we can go through and dig out technical terms, and I guess I try to simplify it for me, but when I look at it, it does not belong in that site. And the ordinance, I learned a new term yesterday, so maybe you all already know this, and I'm sorry if I am telling you something you already know. But the ordinance sets a standard, but there is a gradient of approvability. And I'd never heard that. And so just because it meets the standard doesn't mean that it is as good as it could be or the best thing for that site. And so I think this site could have a better product on it, a better design for that site. It's not the building that I dislike, it's the building in that site. And so for those reasons, we would ask you to consider denial of this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions from the committee? Is there anyone? Yes, please.
Richard McCowan, City Center Development, Ideal Homes, Green Earth Land Design, 30 Northeast 2nd Street. Why am I here? I'm here. I have friends on both sides of this issue, and I hope that after my comments that I still do. The downtown development group is a close-knit group, and I wanted to make a few comments about this project because we've been working downtown continuously since 2010, and we've learned a lot. And the main thing is downtown is hard. It's hard to do development downtown, and I can speak to that because I also do a significant amount of development out on the suburban edge, and it's easy out there, and it's like a cakewalk. So we spend all of our time downtown. Over the last 2.5 years, we've evaluated no less than 15 sites, and we've only pulled the trigger on 2 of them. Interestingly enough, we actually studied this site. Much like, if you are a hammer, everything looks like a nail. I'm a wood guy. I'm a weekend carpenter. I love wooden buildings. When we looked at this site, we certainly brought the limitations of wood construction to our perspective on it, and we couldn't make it work. And so, when I first saw this, I'm like, well, there we go. That makes sense to me. And the thing that I think is so exciting about it, it's a new step toward a new construction technology that we're not doing yet in Oklahoma City, and that we're seeing happening in other markets. We have a competing project not too far away. You all saw it some months back, well, probably about 18 months ago, the Bower, and it's a wooden building. And it really, as we built it, we've run into many people who said, well, when are you going to do a, glass and steel? And I'm like, I don't know how to do that yet. I'm a wood guy. As I've been looking at other markets, we've been trying to figure out the condominium market for many years. And because of my for sale background, I've been asked by many elected officials, city various folks involved in the city government, like, when are you going to do a for sale project? And we finally did pull the trigger, and in fact, I think you'll read a story about our Bower project soon. And it's small, but what's going to create a condominium market is lots of projects, because it's the financing, it's the finding the comparables. And when you don't have any comparables, the appraiser that goes and puts a loan together, he's just grasping at all kinds of things, trying to justify why this is worth, what it's worth. So it's a very exciting new comparable that comes to the market, and I think we all benefit from it. Recently, our most recent trip, the Urban Land Institute chapter, or the Oklahoma Urban Land Institute chapter, we got on a bus, about 40 of us, and we went to Austin, Texas. And the first developer we met with told us their history of their condominium market. They now, are building 30-story buildings and selling them out in a very short amount of time at very high prices. And it's all very exciting, but it wasn't always like that. It starts off with these smaller projects and these incremental steps where we start developing the knowledge and the skill and the expertise of, how do you do this? How do you find the trade contractors to work in these Lego pieces? I, again, limit my construction to the Lego pieces I know how to play with, the kind of like windows that you get from Anderson. Though Anderson doesn't make that kind of sheets of glass. So anyway, I think the thing that I want to also remind you about Oklahoma City being downtown, being hard, each year there's about 6,500 to 7,000 for-sale housing units that are added to the housing stock in Oklahoma City. At Ideal Homes, we've already sold 150 houses since January 1. And we're on the course to have a record year. How many houses have been added to the downtown for-sale housing stock? It's easy. Downtown's exciting, it makes the news, but it's easy to get blinders on and forget that we're all really competing with housing. Just the opportunity for people to go buy a house in the suburbs for much less money, expanding commute times and suburban sprawl, et cetera, which I'll be back at this podium within the next 6 months promoting one of those projects to a different group. And our city needs both. But in order to attract a kind of, urban workforce and to be able to be the exciting city that we're on the fringe of becoming, I feel like we all have to, as a development group working downtown, after all the dust is settled, we have to go back and continue to pull on the rope in the same direction. And that's why I'm willing to come down here and support these developers who are doing something very ambitious. I personally like the contrast between the new and the old. I think, I'm never a fan of fake old. And I guess the other thing that I would share that comes to mind, our most recent book, the Urban Land Institute Book Club read, was Jeff Speck's Walkable City Rules, 101 Walkable City Rules. And in the audible version of that book, Jeff suggests that if you're listening to it, you should listen to it 3 times and memorize it. I've only listened to it once, so I can't quote the exact rule and the exact number, but he does talk about the importance of greater density and these taller buildings, some of the success of other cities where they've been able to go with taller buildings that you can actually see around them and still allow a lot of light to get down to the street level. So I applaud these guys for going after this. I wish them the best of luck, and I just wanted to add those thoughts to for your consideration.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to speak to this? Well, I'll start off. I think, Richard, you said it best, that downtown is hard. There are these projects that come along this committee that I'm often torn over. There are positives and negatives in both directions. I think having this project continued from last month, at least personally, not only benefited from the modifications that the design team made, for me, it gave me more time to absorb it. And I hope the extra time was beneficial to everyone. Last month, my position was related to the height of the building. And given the time over the last month to absorb the design, to spend time on Class and Drive, I've actually come around on the height itself. This is a well-designed building. The treatment at the street level, the treatment of the garage, the design of the building itself, it's a nice building. It will be, if built, a very nice addition to Oklahoma City. I do think it's tall. It's certainly taller than the buildings around it, but it's not massive. It's the way it's been treated in its proportions and relative to the site. Gives it an elegant nature. So I am very appreciative of the efforts made from last month to address, the exception of the height, to address all of the, or most of the comments that were voiced last month. I think the month continuance was a good idea and valuable.
I'd like to comment. I, too, want to thank you for taking the time and going back and looking at the different issues that were raised in the meeting. I believe that's what neighbors are all about, is trying to figure out a pathway that we can coexist in a way that is beneficial for both sides, but we may not always agree. And I think this is one of those situations where we come from it from different perspectives. As I said last month, it's really tough trying to find where that balance is. The height issue was not as big an impediment for me as much as what would be the impact on the area and on the community. And I appreciate the comments about how hard it is in order to do development in downtown Oklahoma City. When Mayor Holt called me and asked if I would complete the term for the person that had this position, I asked how much work it would be. He says, those meetings don't last very long at all. So I will be calling him soon to say, I must have missed something in your comments, because it's not been the case. But what has been enlightening is the amount of detail that the staff has provided in order for us to make these decisions. And I can assure the folks from Villa Teresa that we have not taken the issues and concerns that you brought up at all. We really have seriously looked at those, and that was one of the reasons that I also appreciate the folks with the Elliott in responding in detail to all of those concerns and those issues. And we've had a chance in order to look at that information in order to help us make these decisions. As someone who has lived in Oklahoma City now for 60 years, I've been able to see the changes and been able to witness what has been possible. And I believe the Elliott is another step in what is possible in Oklahoma City. So I am personally excited about the project, not only for what it's going to do to this area, but also the fact that you're bringing in some really unbelievable design and concepts that we have not had in this community. And when we read the letters of support, I was excited to see, especially the folks from St. Anthony's, talk about the value that the Elliott is going to provide in their desire to increase even more the abilities that that hospital will play in the downtown Oklahoma City market. So for me, it is a tough decision, and I am torn because Villa Teresa is something special. My two oldest kids are Villa Teresa kids, and so I'm very familiar with the community, and I have read with interest what you guys are planning to do, and I'm excited about that project also. I just believe they both can coexist, and I think both will be beneficial to the community, and I believe really that if both projects are completed, that they will be another notch in the things that Oklahoma City has been able to accomplish in improving the downtown area.
Okay, I'll go ahead and speak. I don't object to the use. I think it would be a terrific addition to the area. I really do. I like the design a lot. I think it's thoughtful, it's original, it's different, but yet it's still complementary to the surroundings. So I appreciate the changes that were addressed. You know, we've talked about that there's no height, maximum height on this. So I think Mr. Bates mentioned last month that we could build it, they could, you know, propose a 20-story building there. So that would, to me, be out of line. So the question I've been struggling with since the last meeting is what is the right height for that area, considering that, you know, the framework suggests a lower density there, you know, considering all of the buildings surrounding it. So I'm not opposed to a taller building, one taller than the buildings in that area. I'm not opposed to that as long as it's not too tall and that it seems to be compatible with the area. So that's what I've been struggling with, and I've been driving Midtown a whole bunch this week, and I've actually earlier this week had an unrelated opportunity to be on the roof of the physician and surgeon's building. So I actually went to the edge, looking over and trying to get a view from all angles of how this would look. And to me, there's still, because it's West Midtown and it's so close to the residential neighborhoods, there should be a sloping. And that's where I'm struggling with. There should be a sloping from the taller buildings kind of down to that residential area. So for me, after thinking all of this and spending so much time driving around Midtown, what's the appropriate height? To me, it's probably 6 stories. 6 stories. So that's why I was asking the question of could you not expand that floor plate by, you know, 3,000 square feet and reduce that height to 6? To me, it would still have the tower effect, but it would not be so outrageous. It would continue that flow down to the residential areas to the north. And again, I love the design. So that's kind of where I've been struggling with, is the height. I like the project a lot. I just wish it were a little bit shorter.
So I'll reiterate some of the things that I said last month briefly, just that I do think the building is proportioned well. The massing is nice. I can imagine that if, you know, some of the floor plates might get bigger, might actually appear a little bit more massive, harder to have kind of the air and light that kind of comes through the building. So I think this is a really nicely designed project for Midtown. And I also just like the idea of having the diversity in the area and different types of buildings and different types of lifestyle opportunities.
Do we have any more discussion, questions?
I'd like to go ahead and make a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the application on the basis that the project complies with the regulations and guidelines of the Downtown Design District Zoning Ordinance as referenced in Section C and D of the staff report, with the conditions that the applicant obtains variances from the Board of Adjustment for the minimum building height and maximum fence height regulations, and that the applicant obtains approval from the Traffic Commission for the design of a loading zone off Classen Drive.
I'll second.
We have a Jones-Richards motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed say nay.
Correct.
Yep. Yes, the motion carries 4-2. So I believe we need
another recommendation that we recommend approval to the Board of Adjustments for variances from the minimum building height and maximum fence height regulations.
I'll second.
That is Jones Richards again. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Did everybody vote? Okay, did we? Okay, good. The application is approved.
Thank you.
Okay. That concludes cases for individual consideration. We have no other business. We have the communications report as noted in the meeting agenda. Do we have any comments from staff?
Just that we have several items on your agenda for next month. Probably the biggest agenda you've had in a while.
That doesn't mean longest necessarily.
It doesn't. And so just so you'll be hearing from us soon because we want to confirm we're going to have a quorum because it's very difficult to reschedule meetings if we don't. So double check your calendar, mark it in. And I'm excited to have a bunch of different kind of projects.
Do we have any comments from committee members? I'd just like to welcome the new members again to a good stretch of meetings. Good timing. It is good to have some other people and a full committee. We've been shorthanded for a little while, so I think it is really beneficial that when we get these waves of projects, we've got everybody up here contributing. So much appreciated. Our next meeting is Thursday, April 18th. Applications for that meeting are due to staff by 4 p.m. on March 19th. And with that, meeting is adjourned.